Hello, welcome to Shelby Radio. I am Shelby Carino, and this is episode number 697, and this is all about the soul cry. It happened, y'all. It happened. So if you have been tuned in, my gosh, over the last 2 months almost now, maybe, I don't know, and you have been following the reality show of Joe and Shelby as we are processing not just through our twin flame energy together, but through the transition of his mother leaving planet, my dad's death back in 2023, and cutting a huge generational line on both sides of the curses or cutting the cords, whatever it is that you want to call it. It's just an entire untangling, unraveling from his side of the family, my side of the family. And because we are in that twin flame energy together and we are doing the deep soul transmutative work, well, you kind of piss people off when you're no longer being siphoned from or you're returning things back to its original owners in the energies, especially when you have a parent who has died or a parent who is in transition, because those cords run deep in the parental exchange between mother-child or father-child, right? Anyway, I'm going to get into that. Okay, so let me update you as to what happened after last week. If you have missed any of my episodes, go back and watch them. But last week it was episode 696 where I was speaking about the spiritual warfare and end of life. Was it elder abuse? Is it spiritual attack? And just everything that had been going on. Well, I am pleased to report that this past week, because I'm recording this on Monday, right before you're listening to it here on Tuesday, so you're listening to it today, so I recorded it yesterday, is Joe and I have moved through a lot, and it's been very quiet in the noise and the energy, the auric field, which is a good thing. However, I want to say that when I aired my podcast episode last Tuesday, which had to do with what I just mentioned, is it elder abuse? Is it spiritual attack? Is it, that spiritual warfare coming in at the end of life? Well, lo and behold, I wake up, my podcast airs Tuesday last week. I wake up on Wednesday, right? And I have an email submission in my business from my contact form. And I was and somewhere in me, I had a feeling, I knew, probably something was going to come from that episode. And that's a whole long story, probably how I knew, just because I knew I was clearing timelines with putting information out there, being honest about my story, through my podcast and, things like that. So sure enough, I get this email submission and I recognized the name because it is a cousin to Joe, which is actually an adopted daughter to his mother's sister, who's the oldest one in the line of 7 siblings. It's the oldest sister's, one of her daughters that I had explained that, that sister is in a nursing home, and those daughters cleared out that mother's house and all. I mentioned that in another podcast episode. But anyway, I want to get to this submission. So I get this email submission, right? It's past me. I read it and I'm like, oh, so I was right. I was right about the spiritual warfare. Wow. The energy runs deep because this cousin of his who I guess back in the day, I don't even know her. I've never even met her. And so I find it interesting that, okay, I've never met you. And you're submitting a submission into my website. Thank you. You must have felt something enough that you had to go out and find me and then find this episode where I was talking about the spiritual warfare. So somewhere it showed me that in that energy that Joe, my husband, had probably put some energy into her world through time, if they were cousins, for her to, in the force field, find that energy through me and lash it out at me so I could receive back whatever Joe had put into her over time that maybe had fueled her, because it came back to me. It had to, if it was a feminine energy that came out of him, it had to come back through a feminine body. So it came back through me. So she found me, lashed it out at me, and then I received that energy back, and then I gave it back to Joe. So that's why I say energy never lies. Energy always returns to its original source. Always. And that is why I say you have to build your own energy field, because if you don't, and you're the one that is just siphoning from what the others give, which are the light workers, then you have an extremely false identity of yourself. You have an extremely false identity of spirituality, because you're not at you in the energies. Which is why, again, I have my curriculum, because it breaks down your energetic system to build it up so you're never in danger of just siphoning energy from somebody else's light, who at some point in time is going to come back for that light. And Joe even said to me, he was like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. He said, because back in the day, he said, I did. I gave a lot to her. I said a lot to her. You know, there was some kind of interaction. And he said, you know, and when I did, things in her world just started happening, and you know, whatever those things were, which is what Joe has a track record of, is anytime he enters the scene. It's even with his IT clients. If he enters the scene, everything becomes better. You know, things change, you know, so that's why I've said, if he's that powerful with his parts being scattered and things that he had given away in that feminine aspect of himself and the masculine body, well, when all of those things come back to him, I can only imagine how powerful he's truly going to be with all of his parts in, you know, because he's created really good stuff outside of himself while he was down in this shadow work. Same with me. I have psychically given away so much energy to help other people create that I know for me, when all of that energy is in that psychic is as it's coming back to me, I'm going to create very, very big with that because of what I have put out in front of me. It's just the law of karma. You know, what you give out is what comes back. Well, I have given out a lot, and I've given out a lot in my personal psychic energies. Joe has given out a lot of his masculine, feminine energies, right? And so now it's all coming in. So I want to read this submission, and I want to explain to you what this was, okay, after I read it. So this is the what it says. It says, interesting how there's no place to rate your podcast that you are full of shit about. You know damn well that this very large Italian family, who is a very close-knit, loving family, who cares for each other, would never manipulate or hurt anyone. They might be nosy bodies, but it's only out of love and care for their sister. This podcast is your fucking bullshit story, and you two are creating the elder abuse. You two disgraceful and poor souls are looking to suck this woman of all of her money. You are looking to suck the energy out of her. You are the devil. It is a disgrace what you and Joe are doing. Absolute disgrace. You should be ashamed of yourselves. These BS podcasts and stories, trying to make yourselves look like the victims, is just to make money off of this again, to prove the point that you will go to any length to make a little money off of the situation. I am the most spiritual person you will ever meet, and I promise you what I put out to the universe happens. I think you are feeding the world a bunch of shit through your fake stories. It is a real sad disgrace to see people like you feed off the weak. You should be ashamed of yourself. But then again, the devil never is, and you're proving to be the devil yourself. That was the submission. Now, I have to tell you, I was so proud of myself when I read that, because I went, I have arrived. I have arrived. Not only is my signal out here so strong to pull in someone I've never met that I knew, though, in the family line was the one that always said she was the most spiritual, but she also had the most energy on her. I don't have to physically meet someone to be able to understand in the energy who they are. I always said to Joe, I said, yeah, it's that one. She's the one that carries all the energy. And it's so funny that Joe was like, oh, yeah, well, guess what? Back in the day, these were the conversations I had. These were the connections I made with her. Blah, blah, blah. Like, he's telling me all these things, right? And I'm like, oh. So you gave all that energy to her, blew her up into this, false ego, false sense of spirituality. And from my understanding, she's also a lesbian. So, and has a lesbian partner. No judgment. But my point to that is, so she doesn't really have a man in her world that she is exchanging anything with. But back in the day, because you're a male body, you exchange something with her in the energy that fed her masculine side. Because if she's a lesbian, then she doesn't have a man over here that's feeding that. So, okay, it's definitely false ego, right? Now, I say all that to say, and she's adopted. Okay? So I say all of that because it matters in the bloodline. It matters what people do in relationships. I don't care what anybody says. If you have two females together, that is a female body on a female body. I don't care if one of those females runs the masculine energy within her female body and the other female runs the feminine energy in her female body. It's still not a whole and complete piece. Which is why they always have to pull in a man somewhere who's going to run that masculine vibration. Because they're not going to get it from their female partner, even if the female partner is only doing masculine energy. It's why in the world we have men and women. Because there's a difference in how the energy is exchanged. Yet, I don't give a shit who people want to be with. Man on man, woman on woman. I don't care. But I'm going to tell you, don't come at me with your spiritual, bullshit when you're not even bringing in the masculine energy appropriately. You cannot tell me you're the most spiritual person I would ever meet when you're not even facing your masculine demon because you run it through a woman. Nope, sorry. Boop, mic drop, not having it. But yet somewhere in the dynamic of the family, Joe gave that energy out at some point, and she picked it up when they were young, whatever. I don't know. Whatever the story is with it, right? So no wonder it had to come back through me so I could give it back to Joe. So I want to break this down a little bit before I go further into this episode. So I find it very interesting that she has to say this very large Italian family who is very close-knit, loving family who cares for each other, that would never manipulate or hurt anyone. Okay, well, if that is the truth, then why has my husband Joe been the one that has been manipulated and hurt by the entire big Italian family? So much so, they try to control his mother to keep the separation between a mother and a son, which also is what has created that separation between him and his own two children because of what his mother has done. You can't really tell me that that's a very big, large Italian family that doesn't manipulate or hurt anyone. And in the bloodline of Italians, that's what they do. Okay? They're Italian. So maybe you need to research Italian. Okay? So then I look at it and go, they might be nosy bodies. You think? So does it give them a right to be nosy and create manipulation, to create hurt, to create separation? That's not spiritual. Why is this big Italian family going after the one person in the family who used to be revered as the best dad, the best man? Everybody revered Joe. Oh. And then Shelby, I got into the mix and I saw all of the power that was being siphoned out of my own husband. And he got a good woman to go, you know what? This isn't working. And you know what? If this keeps happening, they're going to kill off your two children too. Because there's already been deaths of children in the family. Not happening. You want to know why? Because I'm about the kids. I'm about the children. So in spiritual warfare, you have to look at all of this because it's there. It's in the energies. And it's one thing to be nosy. Yeah, that's fine. It's another thing to overstep spiritual ethical boundaries and to make up your own narratives because those are the ones actually siphoning in a negative way. But, as she says, it's only out of the love and care of their sister. Well, you know what? What about the love and care of the sister's only son that everyone revered in the family? What about that? What happened to that? Because what I say as witches who manipulate men, when they find out there's another witch on the scene to save that man from being siphoned, all hell breaks loose. Because that's how they feed. And if you look at this big Italian family that just loves each other, which is really total bullshit, they all feed off each other. But if you look at the men in the family, there is 7 children. And there's two men in that family. One of them's a twin to a sister. Well, isn't it funny that the 2 boys in the 7 don't even really interact at all with the sisters? Very rarely. It's only just the sisters. It's the 5 sisters. And I always said to Joe, you know, your grandfather was a good man. But your grandmother ran some evil shit in the energies. I can see it in the pictures. I can see it in the energies. I see how it runs through the daughters. And when you look at any man that has come into this family of his, in the men, they have no masculine energy. They have been totally emasculated, or they're dead. And so when I look at the entire realm of what these women do, not just from the sisters, but from the daughters of the sisters, that everything that spans out. And then I look at the men, I go, oh, yeah, you're right. The coven runs deep. And it takes a female to come in and at least save the men. So I'm going to continue with this. This podcast is your fucking bullshit story, and you two are creating the elder abuse. Well, the last time I checked, okay, I have 697 episodes on Shelby Radio. That's a lot of episodes. That would be a lot of bullshit I would have had to just create and spin up in my world, right? Like, I'm sorry, 697 episodes. I don't think it's bullshit story. Why would I be talking about it? Right? This is why I tell people I love it. Even when I work on Keen, or I have new clients come in, I always say, research me. Research my story. Research what happened to me in the energies back in 2011. Go look at my curriculum. Okay? It's all out here for everyone to see. And what I love about this, and this had been coming through my feed, I guess, leading up to this email submission, was if you don't want me to talk about what your part was in the story, well, then maybe you should have acted a little bit different. Because the way I look at this with this cousin of his, I'm like, in my head, I was like, bitch, I don't even know you, but I know you. And you just came into my house, meaning you just came into my website. You just came in to my email submission form, and you just threw a whole bunch of shit at someone who has done a lot of spiritual work, who has a lot of spiritual ethics, who has a lot of guidance in a lot of ways of everything that I've been through. And I thanked this email submission for coming through, because what it did to me was, when I received it and read it, it gave me a power within myself that solidified, wow, I am ready to be visible in ways I've never been visible before. My energetic immunity to this kind of what I call attack or possessioned voice was now neutralized. Because that had always been my biggest fear. What if I go out here and talk about this and somebody says this or does that? Because when you're running the ethics and when you actually care, okay, and you understand, though, you have to share. This is a mission. You got to share so other people can learn. I'm a teacher. It's what I do. But I have a right to be honest as well in that. I don't get to sugarcoat shit just because I don't want to upset the apple cart or be a peacekeeper and, whatever. No, I get to speak my truth. And it's my story. And I get to speak whatever the fuck I want in my story. Because it is my perspective of what's coming in my story. And if you come into my house and you start throwing shit in my house, well, I'm going to throw that fucking shit right back. Because I can. That's what my podcast is about. It's a teaching podcast. So She continues on, you two disgraceful and poor souls are looking to suck this woman of all of her money. Well, I actually literally laughed when I read that line. And when I read this to Joe, I went, what money? What money? Remember, your mom doesn't have money. What money? Remember? What money? And he starts laughing, and I'm like, because every sibling out there was always like, poor, pitiful, his mother. You know, she doesn't have money. That's why everybody's mailing her money, or, you know, keeping her to be the victim, or what's going to happen to her when, you know, she's older or the stuff takes over. Does she have good insurance? Who's going to take care of her? She doesn't have any money. So how can we be after money that she doesn't have? Like, no, that's a mirrored projection. Because all the other siblings, like I said, have millions apparently. But remember, his mother doesn't. Never has. I find that very interesting. It's very telling. Which is why this person's mother, this girl's mother, is in this nursing home that honestly, there's 2 floors that apparently don't have dementia patients, but yet she has, you know, her mental faculties in there. So what? They threw her in there at however much a month, you know. But oh, we've got Joe's mother in an actual fucking home, like a home you live in, not in a apartment facility. Paying less than what they're paying for her, the other sister, to be in something. Yeah, check facts, right? It's really funny when you start pulling energy back, how people will react. So anyway, absolute disgrace. You two should be ashamed of yourselves. This BS podcast and stories trying to make yourselves look like the victims is just to make money off of this again. Well, I will just tell you right now, I make no money off of this story, off of my podcast. My podcast is not for making money. My podcast is for sharing information. I have no sponsors on my podcast. I don't go off and do it that way. My podcast is my gift of service of information. I have other avenues where I make my money in my curriculum. My podcast has never been something to promote in that way. So again, it's interesting. Who's running the money curse? Certainly not I. The projection is coming in. The whole family has been, oh, Joe's after her money. Oh, Joe's after her money. No, Joe is the son to the only child to his mother, who he's taken care of his entire life. And anytime Joe gets reconciliation with his mother, they come in, oh, now it's separated again. All of the people out here who actually do the money. Oh, gosh. You got to love people's ignorance. To prove the point that you go to any length to make a little money off of this situation, I would just like to state for the record, I have been undergoing this fucking madness hardcore for a year and 6 months, and not once have I made any amount of money off of this fucking insanity. So, with that being said, pay attention. Money is energy. And when people want to accuse something that they have, when people want to accuse someone of something they have no information on, it makes you wonder what's going on inside of them. Now, I'm not saying at some point in time, I may not make money off of my stories. I'm a shaman. I'm a storyteller. The greatest shamans are the best storytellers. You want to know why? Because the shamans have lived through the experience. A spiritual person would understand that. Why do shamans share stories? Because the stories have the frequencies. That's why. The stories carry the frequencies. And that is why the stories need to be shared. Because trust me, I don't need to share a story just to share a story. I share a story because I get to have the feedback when it's appropriate for others to go, I am living in that same situation right now. Thank you for giving me perspective. You want to know why? Because I'm very, very psychic, which means I have very, very keen perspectives. But because I've been through the fire, because I continue to grow and expand energetically, because I continue to share my experiences, because I continue to look at all situations involved, I get to share. I get to share the frequencies. I don't hoard. His mother was a hoarder. She never shared any of the energies. She just siphoned them out. And now, in my path of walking a God-filled life, because when I woke up in 2011 and my Kundalini flipped and all of this stuff happened, I said in another episode, maybe it was last week's episode, I no longer have the right to sit here and be like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to say that, or whatever. No, when you wake up, there is an accountability to things. And I even say in one of my courses, never lose your personality. The personality is who you are. But you have to work the energy. And then you weave that into the personality. So I can now say things as blunt as I want to say things out of my human side, but I have the spiritual insight, wisdom, ethics within that. I don't have to sit here and look and act spiritual, because you know what? That's looking and acting spiritual. True spirituality is, this is who I am. This is my personality. And here's the real life shit I've been through, and I'm going to tell it from both sides. And I'm such a God-loving person that even I will bring in the people who are the haters, who are the ones that want to take down the light, and I will send that shit right on back. And I don't have to sit here and be love and light, love and light, love and light, because that is an act. Because what you put out here is what you get back. And true leaders have no fear of giving it back. Because people out here in the spiritual energies are very, very unruly. And it takes people, when they step into their light, to give it back. And say, here you go, that's yours. Maybe you shouldn't have been such a shitty person, or maybe you shouldn't have been such a shitty energy, or maybe you should have. Thank you, because it made me stronger. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Keep doing the fucking work. I have no patience for people anymore who want to suck off the energies. Do the fucking goddamn work. That's why I have a spiritual school curriculum. So you can do the fucking work. And that helps release any victimization. So that's a level that I've gotten to with myself, is I've been doing the work. I keep doing the work. I have the feelings. I keep having the feelings. I have the perspective. I keep having the perspective. I keep sharing. I will continue to keep sharing. At the end of the day, everybody can do their own work. That's what I told my students when I sat inside a classroom. Don't come up here and ask me for the answer. You sit down in your seat and you figure that out. And when I feel like you're stuck and you need a little extra guidance, so I'm going to come in and help give that to you. But at the end of the day, find it within yourself and figure it out. So then she points out, I'm the most spiritual person you will ever meet, and I promise you what I put out to the universe happens. Ooh, when I read that, I went, oh God, Well, she just asked for her karmic shit back. And by her even saying, I'm the most spiritual person you will ever meet, that was an unconscious power play. I'm going to put myself on top of you. And I was just like, oh God, she is so young and stupid. She needs to take my curriculum because she doesn't really understand what she just said and who she said it to. Or maybe she did. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I just went, oh, well, good. I am going to take exactly what she said. Yes, I am a very spiritual person myself. Great. And what it puts out in the universe happens. Oh, good. Well, I must have something good coming back to me then. Mirrored reflection. Let me see what this is. I think you are feeding the world a bunch of shit through your fake stories. Oh, okay. Well, there's a judgment. But that's okay. She can have her opinion and her judgment. And I wish my stories were fake, but they're not. And I am very creative, but I ain't that fucking creative to make up this kind of shit, which is why I keep saying you can't make this shit up. This shit is real, okay? Like, I'm living it, right? It is a real sad disgrace to see people like you feed off the weak. Well, apparently, I would not feel my own internal sense of my own solar plexus power if I was feeding off of the weak, because the weak have no power. So that doesn't even make sense. Okay. And I am putting out my own podcast. So there's no feeding that's going on. Okay. So, and apparently she needs to go back and listen to a lot of my podcast episodes because then she would understand where I was prior to 2011 and how I actually didn't feel like I was in my power and that I was weak and that people were feeding off of me when I was weak. And then when I woke up and then I started becoming powerful in myself, in my voice, in my sovereignty, in my truth, in my ethics, in my God essence, that's when I began getting attacked by the Christians, by the Catholics, by the vampires. Isn't that amazing how that happens? And yet I have a curriculum and I have students that come at me and say to me, why now all of a sudden, Shelby, that I'm awake and I have this light shining? Why is my family turning on me? Why are these other people coming after me? Why are these people telling me I'm the devil? And I'm like, oh, well, you must be doing something right because you're no longer their scapegoat. You're no longer absorbing their chaos. You're no longer taking in what isn't yours. Your auric field is getting stronger. And the ones who like to feed are the ones who will come and throw the dagger. It's spiritual warfare as we're undergoing a spiritual crisis. That's why I tell people, never pay attention to a personality. A personality is just that, a personality. It's not the truth. The energy is the truth. So you pay attention to the energy that's coming through the personality, because then you'll cut it with a knife and see exactly what it is. So then it just says you should be ashamed of yourself, but then again, the devil never is. And you are proving to be the devil yourself. And I went, oh, okay. Well, that is not the first time that this big Italian family who loves each other, that doesn't manipulate or hurt one another, that's not the first time those words have been uttered from that side of his family. Okay? And yet I go, okay. Say what you want to say. You're entitled to that. But if you come into my house of God with your unprocessed anger, and I have done the work of my God essence the way I have, and I have processed through and done a check of myself at every layer, then if you walk into my house of God, my territory, to think you're going to throw something at me. Well, thank God I've done enough work in my immunity to send that back. Because that's the path of the light worker. To change your own internal fears, shadows, into strength. So you no longer absorb what would have been your fear in the past. And that is what that email submission did for me, was show me, wow, I've evolved. Because back in the day, when I had a tribe that I ran my curriculum through, I had gone through an intense, deeply soul pain, where I felt like this one individual was taking the business, my energy out from underneath me in the business and redoing it for themselves. And I don't know what it was about that experience, but it changed me. And when it changed me, it was that I'll never allow that to happen again. But what it did was it shut off a level of my energy and my voice. And it didn't allow me to expand. And that part had to be healed. So when this submission came in, I was like, and it bounced off of me. Okay, the energy actually bounced off of me. So it's like she sent it, but it bounced off of me. There was no absorption on my end. It was just the human aspect of me going, what an idiot. Meaning, you need to take my courses. Like, that was like one of the first things that I said out loud was to Joe. I was like, oh, wow, she really needs my courses. But I'm glad she made it to my website. I mean, my gosh, she even made it onto my podcast. Wow, maybe she'll listen to more, because if she does, well, then maybe she can start really becoming, a different version of herself, of whatever that may be, so that it just jumped right off of me. And I just went, oh my God, I've arrived. And therefore I was extremely in gratitude that it came in. Because was it really her saying that? Okay. And no, what I believe was it was really a possessioned voice. Okay. It was basically like a fragment of a soul that was carrying maybe his mother's rage. Okay. Or the coven's protection of what they were programming, or the energetic residue maybe of the false Italian family unit mask that everybody wears. Because like I said, the siblings, especially the sisters, the 5 sisters, they were raised to be the peacemaker, right? So, but yet they all talk about each other behind each other's backs. So I'm like, nobody speaks truth in this family, and anytime I have come in to do it, or Joe has come in to do it, oh God, no, that's truth. Oops, oh God, no, that's a feeling, put up the wall. Okay. So that's probably what a lot of that was coming through that submission. And it could also have been basically a parasitic siphon of power that was masked as spirituality, which I have seen many, many, many times. That is why I said sometimes some of the most dangerous places you can go are the places where people are doing the spiritual acts. Because that's where people act like they're spiritual. Spiritual is not an act. It's a way of life within your own sovereignty, without siphoning energy from others with a false pretense that it's yours. Okay? Spirituality is about the destruction of self to get to your own personal power and sovereignty. Not playing in the energies and to feel good in the energy. That's why when I find people, when they're like playing out here in the energy because they just want to feel good, they want the drum circle, they want this, they just want to feel the energy, my radar always goes off. And I'm like, ooh, that's going off. Like they just want to feel good, but are they doing the work? That's what my curriculum basically separate. You know how people say, oh, this can separate the men from the boys or the women from the girls or whatever. Well, my curriculum separates the spiritual masks from the true spiritual leaders that are doing the work. So, and if you're not in that true spiritual leader form of self, well, you don't make it through my curriculum because you would have to change and everything around you would change. So this cousin of his was what I would call the final carrier of the weaponized feminine energy that my husband accidentally seeded into her force field at some point. Which made sense when he was telling me, some things in the past that he would talk to her about and how he would put something in there and then all of a sudden she would go off and do something and and like she said, what I put out here happens. He was like, yeah, because back in the day I would put this out here and it would happen. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, of course, because you're running it. The masculine energy is very powerful when it directs it into something. So no wonder she was mad because his masculine energy of what he seeded in there is coming back to himself so he can redirect that and seed it elsewhere to create abundance, right? So she probably felt the extraction. So basically, when I spoke the truth through my voice in that episode last week, I wasn't necessarily, I didn't have names out there. There was no actual blame. I was just witnessing the pattern. And by witnessing the pattern, then her system, which had been nourished by that pattern, which was a distorted pattern, well, her system then exploded. It erupted. Of course she had to frantically go off and find somebody to send that energy to because the truth hit. So it told me everything I already knew. Thank you. Yet again, not because I need to be right. I'm right. Because like I said, never get in the way of when the enemy is working to destroy themselves or expose what the actual truth has always been. So the light actually pierced the narrative of this false Italian family that acts like they love each other. When really, they're just stabbing each other behind each other's backs at different times. So this is what happens when someone's identity depends on the lie staying hidden. And that's what linked it back in my genealogical bloodline with my dad. So back in, was it 2013? Where's my, hold on. I'm opening my content. Well, where did I put it? I wonder if it's in my podcast. Oh, no. This is my Ascension timeline. Hold on. I'm getting it out. Okay. So I have this, I talk about my Ascension timeline in one of my podcast episodes. But anyway, I was looking to see, yeah. Okay. January 25th of 2013 was when I had that incident with my sister where she punched me in the face and I called the sheriff, right? That's when my whole life changed. And when that happened to me, that was a defining moment in my life that I was done being abused. I was done being the family scapegoat for my mother that was working through my sister. And then when my sister punched me, that it broke the curse, basically, right? And that was my time where I was able to find and get back into my power. But what got exposed was when my dad at one point had said, "You're not going to throw this family under the bus." Because I tell the story of what happened where I had called the sheriff and they were going to get back in touch with me because I didn't want to press charges I wanted information. And somehow someone intercepted my mail when I lived with them and this happened. And I never got the communication that there was a court date, that things had actually moved forward and all of that. So I talk about this in another episode, but when all of that was going down, I never understood why my dad was like, you need to drop the charges. I was like, what charges? Like, all I did was call the sheriff. I have no communication of anything else. But he kept reiterating that. And I was like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, so I literally was operating in the blind when my dad was like, well, you need to drop the charges. I'm like, I didn't file charges. So I don't know what you're talking about. And then I'll never forget when he said to me, "You're not going to throw this family under the bus." And I was like, okay, first of all, I haven't thrown the family under the bus. The family just threw me under the bus. And I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about because there are no charges. I've had no communication from the sheriff's office. And then here it is, years later, I find out, oh, wow, there was a court date. Oh, wow. What I filed with the sheriff of domestic abuse actually stood. I didn't know that. I was innocent and young and not knowing what was going on. My mother denies to this day intercepting the mail, which I believe wholeheartedly she or my sister did because obviously we all lived in the same house. And then I find out later my parents hired an attorney for my sister. Why would you hire an attorney for my sister if my sister didn't do anything and there were no charges? Like, so literally I was, again, out here not knowing what was going on. But yet my dad said, "You're not going to throw this family under the bus." Oh. Okay, so the lie that we're a family and that we're loving is what y'all want to act like we still are. And then now that lie has been exposed as false, now you're going to come after me because I just exposed the truth. Oh, okay, got it. Now I understand why Jesus was persecuted and nailed to a cross. I mean, let me just put it that blunt. Because when the person in the family who wakes up to actual truth, they begin exposing the lies or the treachery or the false religion or whatever the family is under. And if the family doesn't want to see it, if they don't want to address it, if they don't want to stand for it, they will persecute the one who is breaking the general curse, because they've got to make sure they don't break it, because if they break it, then that means they break it all the way through the line, which means everyone then can no longer sell the lie of what the family is. Because now every truth, every feeling, every energy, every ounce of spiritual, generational information begins to become exposed. And the truth is most people are comfortable living in the lie. So why this submission hit me and then released me is I felt it in the body because it was an energetic echo of the trauma that I had suffered several years prior with that tribe member who hijacked my visibility. But this time, I didn't run. I didn't shut down. I didn't even question myself. And it definitely didn't silence my voice because here I am sharing it with you today on this episode. And when I did feel it come in and I felt that tremor in the body, I transmuted it very quickly. And that's a part of mastering your soul. Because that submission for me wasn't about her, the person who sent it. It was about me standing in the full broadcast of light and not fracturing. That's what that was about. And it also proved to me in my sacred truth that my podcast is no longer necessarily a place of exposure. It is now a platform of truth, protected by the force of alignment of the podcast itself. And that's a pretty powerful place to be. And that is what I've always wanted for my podcast. A platform of truth that is protected by the force of alignment itself. And the only way the podcast is aligned is because of me. Because I am my podcast. And I have always said, it has to align in me if my wish is for it to align in others. And at episode 697, I can finally say, wow, I think I made it. I think I finally broke that fear of visibility that happened to me years ago with that one tribe member, with my business. And I want to also say this. If someone says to you, I'm the most spiritual person you'll ever meet, be aware that darkness always cloaks itself in light when it's about to be exposed. And when someone says that, it's a dead giveaway. And darkness doesn't have to be bad darkness. It can just be someone's shadow shit that needs to break open so they can continue walking towards more light. It doesn't have to be bad and evil, even though there is bad and evil out there. It depends on what the person does with it. So when she made that comment, when that possession voice made that comment, it was basically that energy of her trying to outrank my frequency. That's the spiritual warfare. I'm going to outrank your frequency, right? It was spiritual bypassing at a weaponized level. That's the spiritual warfare. And it proved the actual deep delusion that's running through the bloodline. That, oh, I'm spiritual, so I can never be wrong. Or we're a close family, so there's no dysfunction, right? That's the collective denial in the big Italian family. That I came here to help shatter because I'm Joe's wife. We're twin energies. And it happened. It shattered. And I can't even say, oopsie daisy. Okay? It is what it is. So what shifted after that email submission was, I feel like now the power is returning to its rightful creators and owners. And there was an anchor somewhere, ANCHOR, of this energetic structure that has been playing out of this collapse from everybody on the chessboard. And there's a timeline of exposure when things have to present themselves. So the moment of spiritual release happened, and it happened through my voice in that episode. Okay? And so now this loop is closing. This was one of those final siphoning moments that had to get done. Okay? So with this cousin of his, or whatever she is of his, reaching out through me, it basically, she was the carrier of this unhealed feminine wound that was actually fed by Joe's misplaced love somewhere that maybe he didn't get from his mother, that he was trying to get from this big Italian family. But it was fueled by his mother's emotional starvation, because she didn't feel like she was getting fed. She was getting siphoned, which is why everybody was feeding from her, or trying to now give so they could feed more. And it was hidden under the identity of this family loyalty. There's no loyalty in any of these people. And it was enraged. It came enraged by the light that I sent through the broadcast. And there was something in me that refused to fight it, and I let it hit. And now it's gone. And this was basically my energetic exorcism of fear being seen. Not for her, for me. And that I will never be afraid to be visible again. And if anything, it just fueled my truth. It fueled what I've already known. And there was a part of me that came back to me. And I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you for the submission. Thank you for being a player on the chessboard that came back, gave the energy, because it really had to do with Joe, but that masculine energy coming through me hit my masculine field. It healed something in me, and then it returned as power to Joe, because it was his original energy that gave it out. It's the returning of his fragments, okay, that he is now reclaiming. And basically, it's like a twin reclamation, okay, that we've both been waiting for ourselves. Because in the twin energies, like I said, you destroy everything of self. Like, it is just a complete and utter destruction of your energies, okay? Masculine and feminine. So you can rebuild as whole. So this is this soul cry that yet I didn't cry. It was more of a power. Okay? And next week, I'm going to catch you up on the actual soul cry. Okay? What actually, once that moved through and we moved into the weekend, some significant events happened that actually brought some things up on the timeline of last year. So I knew, that soul cry was coming, and I'm going to explain what that is or was. I was actually going to do it in this episode, and I didn't get to it. So apparently I really needed to discuss everything that was behind that email submission, because it's a very important piece of information that will lead to why I was finally able to let go and release, because it was a final fragment in me that I needed to have to where I was going to allow myself to be visible again. You can have a podcast and have things out here and, and never be seen, even though you're being seen. Okay. It's a different level internally to allow yourself to be visible, to be exposed, for people on mass levels to find you. So that's why I even laughed in the email submission when she was like, oh, how dare you, you're making money off of this and that and whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm not. This is my podcast. I'm not making money off my podcast. But then I was like, but thank you for putting in there that I am going to make money off of my story, because I've done the work. I have a curriculum, if I make a documentary, of course I'm probably going to make money off of that. I am still human. I still have to pay bills. I still have to live. Okay. People that are, walking things out, they still, when they're in their spiritual destruction, a lot of times they don't make money. And so, yes, I need to make money now as I'm rebuilding, because how are you going to help people if you don't have the money to build the structures to help people? So I was even at, oh, good. Well, thank you for putting that in there, that I'm now going to make money off my shamanism, my stories. And you know what? That's actually an okay thing, because people think, oh, if you're out here doing shamanic work and spirituality and you shouldn't be making money. That's God's work. Well, how am I supposed to live? Because I'm still over here being human. And a lot more people are sensing that. A lot more people, meaning they're starting to sense, wait a minute, I need to go on my spiritual journey, but I'm over here still having to pay a mortgage. How do I do both? Okay, yeah, that's all in my curriculum too, right? So money is just a curse, depending upon how you utilize it, how you see it. There are so many people who do money under the false prophet of God. I mean, all you have to do is look at the churches. Not all of them, okay? But there's so many things getting exposed right now. Money is just energy. What if money went away? We would all still be out here doing something. We would just have to barter, okay? So, again, the planet is clearing a money curse. So we can reset the energetic field of value and worth. And it begins with inside ourselves as spiritual beings. And the only way you clean it up is to go on the sacred path of destroying your own illusions and distortions and idea of what family is, and rebuilding the truth of yourself in the energy as a sovereign being. And then you understand the true definition of family. Because remember, the family that you're born into, those are the souls that came in here to teach you your hardest lessons. So on a soul level, that's really love, if they're actually here to teach you your hardest lesson. But unfortunately, a lot of times, the family has to get broken up if it's ever going to heal. Meaning if those souls are ever going to go on their true actual healing. Whew, okay, that's it for today. That's all that I'm like, whew, that just, I'm done. I bowed that through. All right. But I will be back next week, and I'm going to tell you what happened after that. A couple of days of what happened after that, and how it linked up to something on my timeline from last year. All right. But right now, everything is, calm. We're just moving ahead, and, that's all I can say at this point. But anyway, all right. So that's it. I will be back next week with what I said I was going to be back with. And I'll leave it there. So until next week, have a good one. Take care, and I'll speak to you then.